What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to this week's episode of the Formula Podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Carlson. On the Formula, we break down and explore the elements of achievement in world-class performers. What that means is I sit down with some awesome and talented people in their field, and I ask them questions. How did they get started? What advice do they have for other people who are looking to develop the same skill set or results that they've achieved today? We talk about their lessons, experiences, and routines, really everything that has gone into, or if I may, the formula for their personal or professional life today. This week's guest is the Life Stylist Podcast host, Luke Storey. Luke just hit a really big milestone in his own podcast. He hit over 1 million downloads recently. So congratulations on that, Luke. On this episode, we sit down and dive into how he got started on his podcast, what advice he has for other people looking to get started in their own podcasting journey. We talk about gear, growing your audience, monetization strategies, and also how to, not say ums and chop up words when you're trying to do an introduction for your show. So I enjoyed this show a lot with Luke, and I'm hoping he comes back again sometime to talk about biohacking, but that's for another day. I learned a lot of stuff that I'm going to be applying to this show, so you might hear a little sneak peek on some things that'll be taking place in the near future. So without me talking any more about this show, I'm just going to let us get right into it with the Life Stylist Podcast host, Luke Storey. There you go. How am I coming through sound-wise? I picked up picked up one of these Yeti mics, and I was testing it out earlier today to make sure it worked all right. So this will be my first.
Oh, cool.
My first interview with a Yeti mic. So
yeah, it sounds good, dude. Is my voice coming through well?
Yeah, it sounds great, man. What are you using for a mic?
This is an Audio Technica. What is this thing? Let me see if there's a label on it. Audio Technica AT2020. Okay. And I had a Yeti, and then I had another one, and I found I couldn't get the kind of rich tone I was looking for until I had a what do they call that? XLR output on the mic, rather than a USB. So I have a little thing called, it's like an interface or a preamp actually called a Scarlett.
Yeah. Are you running that on a Mac?
Yes.
How's that working?
It works great, dude. I record into Adobe Audition for my solo tracks, and then I record usually in Zencaster remotely with a backup video in Skype. But when I do in-person interviews, I use these Audio Technica headset mics. They don't sound quite as good as this one, but they're passable,
Okay.
But yeah, what I was doing, the first setup was a Yeti mic into the USB in the back of my iMac into GarageBand, and everything would just crash all the time. It was so annoying. So this is my current setup. Now, the only thing I don't like about this is I paid $20 a month for Adobe Audition, which seems like a lot. I'm like, why am I doing this? But I just got used to using it, and now I'm stuck. Yeah,
I totally, I get that. I mean, I had bought a used Scarlett because I was, I've basically went from like, all right, I'm gonna try to do this podcast thing out for a little bit, see how it goes, and I bought a cheaper Audio Technica mic off of Amazon, and then I was like, okay, I'm enjoying this, I'm getting some listeners, and then I upgraded a little bit, and I tried to I bought a used Scarlett off of Craigslist, and I hooked it up, and then it just, I couldn't get it to work right, so I ended up taking it back. I think it was broken or something.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I figured I have a couple friends that do podcasts as well, and they spoke highly of the Yetis just because of setup time for if you're like on the road or something, you can just like pop it out and sit it on a table anywhere, so you're good to go.
For sure, man. I think they're fine. I was just got nitpicky,
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I want to say thanks for doing this, man. I've been following your stuff on Instagram for a little while at least. I'm not sure exactly when, but
cool.
I don't know. I'm always like, what the hell is he doing with that thing? Or one of them that caught my eye was the I don't know what it was called, but it looked like the back of like a a truck trailer with like two wheel wells, and you were like kind of going up and down on it.
Yeah, the shifter.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
What is that for? It looked like it was for like realigning your back.
Yeah, it realigns your whole skeleton. In fact, I'm bummed because I was training on it, God, probably like 4 or 5 days a week, and then they went out of town for the holidays and took it with them. But yeah, it essentially is like it's sort of like a self-perpetuating elliptical, but it's a split elliptical with 2 tracks. So it essentially like puts your pelvis, well, it does a lot of things, but your pelvis and your spine back into alignment, because it sort of, the inertia of it forces them to go where they're supposed to go, and it grinds out scar tissue and stuff. It's really cool. And also just induces flow state, because it's this weird ambidextrous movement that you would never do in any other way. It's just a bizarre invention.
Yeah, you probably have to be pretty focused in order to like not fall off too.
Dude, totally. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a cool device.
Yeah, I'll have to. I've never seen one before, so I don't even know where I would check one out. But it looked cool.
I think the one that I was on is their prototype. There's maybe a few of them around in some like fitness centers and stuff like that. A lot of the sports teams use them, but I don't think there's too many of them in existence. They haven't like scaled and really went into production. He's just kind of made them custom ones for different people here and there, but they're in the process of trying to blow it up and make them, more widespread, like reformers and Pilates, that kind of thing, where they have classes with a bunch of them and all that stuff.
Yeah, it looked like something that, I mean, at least it caught my eye because it was something different, but it also looked like it probably took, I mean, to get that thing to go back up and down with as much tension was probably on it, probably takes quite a bit more force than it looks like.
Yeah, it's weird, dude. It's hard to explain. It's like I don't know, surfing on a treadmill or something. It's an interesting design.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's good for your brain too, because it's just, you do all of these counterintuitive movements and things like that. So when you go and switch directions or do different patterns or try to control it, it really connects your nervous system to your brain in a unique way. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's a lot of things that I feel like kind of help out with that. And I want to jump into that, but I want to save it for
yeah. I was gonna say, are you recording yet? Because
So Luke, what got you into podcasting in the first place? What got you started?
What got me started was looking at the fact that I had some, knowledge and experience put together over the course of the past 21 years or so. And I wanted to start putting that stuff out and sharing some of my discoveries. So I had to look at the different, possibilities in terms of the type of format that I think I could be consistent with. And I like doing video, but video requires a crew and lighting, and it's a bit more involved. It's something that's difficult to do totally on your own and make it decent production value. It's also expensive. So video was kind of out, and I thought, well, I could have a blog and I could write about, different spiritual ideas or about meditation or biohacking and health stuff, whatever I happen to be wanting to put out. But writing is so laborious. So I really thought about, well, what am I good at? And something that I'm good at doing is talking. Sometimes
Right.
A little too good at it. I have my own podcast, and it's like sometimes my guests are like, dude, could you shut up and let the guests talk? Because I tend to be kind of a motor mouth. So I thought, that's it. I'll just need a couple microphones, and I can, I can interview some of my favorite people. And so out of all the means by which I could put out content with some consistency, I just decided on podcasting. And I think really just because the way my brain learns best is by listening. So I'm a huge podcast fan myself, and I've been listening to audio since, oh my God. I used to listen to talk radio back in the day. And then I used to buy also these big cassette sets from, I don't know, Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer, like inspirational personal development stuff. Even before CDs, I was listening to, just audio programs and trying to learn and better myself, and then went to CDs and then to MP3s and then to podcasts. So it was just kind of a natural progression.
So you said you listen to a lot of other podcasts. Do you have any favorites that you'd like to share?
Yeah, it's funny when I switch them all the time, but when I said that, I literally thought to myself, I was like, oh shit, now he's going to ask me what ones are. But I can tell you, because I have them all, of course, loaded, the ones I'm subscribed to. So I sort of do it by the time of day. So, for example, first thing in the morning, I want to hear something spiritual and inspiring. So I'll do like the Hay House podcast or Hay House Radio or Hay House World Summit. I'll do Sharon Salzberg, Meta Hour, Oprah's Super Soul Conversations, Tony Robbins, Brendon, Burchard, stuff like that. That's kind of like I want to train my brain to think from a more spiritual perspective earlier on. And then in terms of just general habits, I, of course, listen to a lot of the health ones. So I haven't listened in a minute, but up until a few months ago, I probably heard every Bulletproof Radio podcast in existence. But I've just been focusing on some of the business ones and stuff. So I haven't listened to many of the health ones, but definitely Bulletproof. And it just ended, but probably my favorite podcast was my friend Daniel Vitalis's show, Rewild Yourself. And he just stopped after a couple years. But that was, for kind of health and lifestyle, that was one of my favorites. And then, of course, if there's a guest I'm interested in, I'll drop in on Rogan or Tim Ferriss. Those are, obviously two of the biggest podcasts, but I wouldn't say I'm like a regular listener. It has to be something I'm interested in. So if Rogan's doing like a UFC thing, I'm like lost on that. I don't get it. But if he has, something that I'm interested in on, like that would be a place I would follow a guest onto his show because he's going to do something creative with them.
Yeah, and so he's got so many episodes out too. I think he's at like 1,100 or something.
Oh, dude, it's crazy. Yeah, it's just madness. So yeah, mine kind of oscillate between the spiritual and the health stuff. And then I do listen to sometimes just podcast about marketing. Like I love Amy Porterfield. She's got a show called Online Marketing Made Easy. And she does cool things like she'll take you kind of behind the curtain of her own podcast and explain her entire workflow and how she monetizes it and how she batches her episodes and really like proprietary stuff where you're listening to and you're going, should I be getting this for free? You know what I mean? I think that's even like her catchphrase is like, yeah, information's so good, you can't believe it's free. And it really is. So I love Amy Porterfield in terms of just, marketing stuff. So that's what's on my playlist right now.
Yeah, I'm writing down a couple of those. I've listened to Bulletproof before, but some of those other ones are new ones to me, so I'll have to check them out.
Yeah, Bulletproof's he has just really great biohacking kind of cutting edge stuff on there, which is really useful.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, we could probably talk about just like the concepts and theories behind the Bulletproof Diet, the Bulletproof Podcast, all of that stuff, because it's, growing up, I was taught, like, as far as nutrition goes, I was taught the complete opposite of what like the Bulletproof Podcast teaches. So it's just, I find all that stuff to be, every time I hear it, I'm like, oh man, I need to be doing that a little bit differently, or be like tweaking my diet or removing these types of habits or even types of foods. It's all like, to me, it's all like groundbreaking stuff, but I'm sure that to other people that it's more familiar with, it's like, okay, well, I've heard a lot of this before.
Well, a lot of the health crazes, because I've been following this stuff for a long time. I mean, both my parents were really into vitamins and supplements and health food and all that stuff. So I've been kind of watching these trends come and go for a long time. And there are a lot of them that are cyclical. They'll, be popular for a little while and then they die out and then they come back. Like kombucha, for example, was popular like for a minute in the mid 90s and then it sort of faded out for a while and then now it's really popular again. But me and all the health nuts, like in the mid 90s, we all had like our kombucha spores and would be making it at home and it was the thing, and then it sort of phased out. So I have watched the trends kind of come and go, but I think that in terms of just your average person and dietary recommendations, now we're in the information age. So you're getting data and information from people that aren't necessarily motivated to sell you something. So if you're following, the food pyramid that the FDA puts out in the 1950s, well, it's motivated by certain aspects of agriculture and not necessarily with humans' best interest in mind, you know?
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of hidden motives and things like that, where you have something like, you know, the low fat diet craze as a means by which to lose weight, which of course is totally illogical now. And most of us realize that, you know, oh, you can lose weight by eating more fat. What? You know, so there is a lot of things have been sort of turned on their head, but it's exciting because now things are moving so fast and the information's being shared so quickly and efficiently that I'm finding that like things that people thought were true 6 months ago are being toppled over or improved upon with, you know, ketogenic diets and all this sort of stuff. So I try to not get too hung up in all of the crazes and being too rigid about it, but I do also pay attention to what's going on, and I try things out here or there to see what works for me.
Yeah, so let's bring it back to the Life Stylist Podcast. So what is the Life Stylist Podcast? What do you do on your show?
The idea of the show was to take all of the experts that I've studied over all of these years and bring them on the show and translate the information that they teach and their experience to my audience in a way that is simple, easy, off the cuff, real, straightforward, and in a way that people can readily apply it. So I'll interview people from the health industry, for example, that are typically very scientific and sometimes really nerdy and geeky. And then I look at it as my job to sort of distill down their expertise and make it palatable for the average listener. So I might take something very scientific and make it simple and easy to apply. And then more on the metaphysical, I'll take someone who's maybe a really esoteric, spaced out meditation teacher or something that people might find a little too hippy dippy to take seriously, but I think I have a knack of kind of taking that information and breaking it down again in a way that is applicable by your average person. So my goal, I see it as a host, is to sort of be a translator. It's to take people that speak seemingly different languages and create a unified voice so that people can benefit from listening. And I got the idea, I think, of that just because over the past many, many years now, I've been working on improving all areas of my life, from the outside, the physical, the material, to the inside, the metaphysical and the spiritual. And I've found that at different times I've focused, of course, more in one area or another in my life. But it's one of those things where you can't completely take your finger off the pulse of any of those aspects of our humanity. You got to take care of your body and your biology and your hormones and neurotransmitters, and make sure that you're detoxing from, our environment and the things that we eat and all that, in order to think clearly, to be motivated, to be creative, to be altruistic, to be able to sit down and meditate and relax. So it's, I really like the holistic mind, body, spirit approach to life and to well-being. So that was kind of the basis of, that was the only parameters I really had for the show. It has to have something to do with health or spirituality in some respect. And so I'm just taking bits and pieces of truth that I can find, because that's kind of what I'm obsessed with finding, is just more and more truth, and, putting those pieces together. And that's why I called it the Life Stylist, because in my former life, I was a fashion stylist. So I put together different outfits for celebrities and things like that in Hollywood for 17 years. And so you take bits and pieces and you build a composite whole out of it. And that's what I do on the show, but not with the outside, the clothing and whatnot, but just with principles, truths, and practices, kind of putting all those pieces together for people so they can listen to an episode and walk away and be like, okay, cool. I have a concrete idea of one thing, at least from this episode, that I can go apply.
So what do you think the biggest lessons that you've learned are since you've started this show?
Oh, man, you know what? It's been such an exercise in just... I've learned a lot just in terms of technical, facts and lessons and things from the host, of course, but just as a project in and of itself, I think I've really had to look at a lot of the limiting beliefs that I have, because it's something that I've never done before. I don't have a history in broadcasting. I'm not like a professional TV or radio personality or anything like that. I really have no idea what I'm doing in one sense. So having been a musician and then worked in fashion for, 20 years, to just make a switch at 45 years old and go, cool, I'm going to start my own radio show, basically, which is what, a podcast is at the end of the day. I met a lot of inner procrastination and resistance and just imposter syndrome and just doubting my ability to do that. So I think the overall thing has been just making a decision to set out and do something, and to, have summon the courage and sort of the determination to just do it and put myself out there in a way that was quite vulnerable. So I've gotten a lot of just self-respect and self-worth out of that accomplishment, and just for the fact that I did it, regardless of how it was received. But the fact that the show's been really successful and really taken off has also just been a huge boost to kind of motivate me in different areas of my life, and to help me realize the fact that I do have a lot to offer in these areas that I explore on the show. And so it's just been a huge sort of mirror for me to see, like, wow, dude, you're actually really good at this, and people respond to the ways in which you put this information out into the world. So it's been kind of a personal challenge to do it and to keep going, and not only accomplish it, but have it be well received. And also just as an ongoing exercise, and just seeing how I can push the envelope of vulnerability and realness, and not try to put on airs, and just be myself, to just totally be raw and real on the show, and know that the people that are into what I'm putting out are going to stick around, and the ones that aren't, and to be okay with that either way. And what's weird about it is the more that I find that I'm just really kind of down to earth and forthright in my perspective on all the content that I put out, the more people like it, which is kind of counterintuitive. I think, well, I won't put other people in the box, but I know for myself, sometimes I really try to reel in my personality a bit, and to sound more professional or smarter or more PC or whatever. And it's like, I just realized at a certain point, it's so exhausting to try and put on some kind of air, and put on some sort of facade of having my shit together. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think that's something that lends itself to the popularity of the show, is I'm not like the host of a show saying, hey, I figured life out, I'm up on the top of the mountain, I'm gonna show you little people how to meet me up here. It's sort of like, hey, let's walk the trail together and kind of discover it along the way. So it's been a huge learning experience for me in that way. It's like been actually a great, not only a way to start a new company in a sense, but also just to kind of reboot my whole midlife direction, where I want to go. Like I said, now I'm 47. I started the show and the whole thing almost 2 years ago. And it's just like, oh, cool. Now I know you can reinvent yourself. So who knows, maybe in 10 years, I'll be like, I'm going to switch it up again, because I've done it before, which is a cool feeling.
Yeah, that's gotta feel good. And as you were talking about getting started on your podcast, I started reflecting a little to when I started mine, because I just released episode 31. I still have a lot of growing left to do as I continue to work on this, but I'm thinking back to when I first started, and I recorded the first few episodes, and I edited them myself. And that is a very special kind of torture when you're not used to being on a microphone or doing interviews or stuff like that, because you're like, oh man, did I just say again? Or,
yeah
why do I start every sentence with like? Damn it, stop.
Oh dude, you're speaking my language. I've been working on, and by the way, kudos to editing your show. I mean, I edit some of my promos and intros and outros as I go, but to sit there and edit an interview, oh my god. But yeah, once you start broadcasting, which is what we're doing, if you know what to look for, you start to find all of those ticks and nuances that are really annoying. So I notice when I'm listening to someone who's a host or a guest on a podcast, if they say like, sort of all of those filler words, it annoys the hell out of me. And if I catch myself doing that, it drives me crazy. And some of them are really hard to get rid of. And have been the easiest for me. but and sort of, those three are a lot sneakier. They're tougher to ferret out of your speech pattern.
Yeah, and it's funny because when I feel like you've gone through this process before, where when you start taking it out of your vocabulary during your interviews, you start to notice it when you're doing it in normal conversation.
For sure, yeah.
And it's, see, I was almost like, and it's like, but now I'm aware that I'm doing it. So I guess an example would be, you're mid-conversation and you go to say it, and then you just stop and kind of pause and then try to figure out what else to say instead of like or so or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, man, because in the old paradigm of radio, they say that, silence is death, right? You never want to leave a gap on radio because there's nothing to look at. So it is awkward in a sense if you're trying to be concise and use your words sparingly and stay focused and not use those. Really, they're just like flags of insecurity is what all of those things are. They're like, don't leave me. If I stop talking, you're going to leave the conversation is really what it is. It's sort of an ego trip. But it is, I find like doing public speaking, there went a like snuck in there, but doing public speaking, I have a much easier time pausing those power pauses where you just stop and wait for a moment. You can speak like that and it draws the audience in. But when you're on a microphone, especially as we're recording where we're not even doing video, we're not face to face, when there's a pause within a statement or a sentence or something like that, it's a lot more awkward, and it takes much more awareness and patience to just allow that space to be there.
It's difficult. I know exactly what you mean, because sometimes after I ask a question or I've completed a sentence, the guest doesn't necessarily jump in where I left off, and you feel that like awkward tension where you feel like you should start talking again.
Right, totally. That's why I'm lucky to live in LA, so a lot of people that I would want to interview pass through here, and I travel a bit to New York, and so I'll do a lot of recordings out there. But I'll wait 2 months to interview someone just in case they're visiting LA or I'm going to be wherever they are, just so I can do it in person to get a more powerful rapport.
Yeah,
because it's difficult even on Skype video, but I find that just doing it, mic to mic, like having a phone call, it's not like you won't get good content. It just lacks a certain sort of chemistry. I find when I sit down with someone and I can really turn on my empathy and really connect with them in the same room, that the depth of the conversations and the spontaneity of them is a lot more rich. And I think that's had a lot to do with why people resonate with the interviews that I do, because I'm sitting there with that person really vibing, and I record everything I do on video and Instagram Live and Facebook Live and stuff like that as I go. So the listeners of the show always get sort of a backstage pass into that whole process, which is difficult to do when you're recording remotely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on the whole. When you're sitting in the room with the guests, you can tell when they want to say something, or when they have something to say, or how they feel about what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, body language, dude. What do they say? Like, body language makes up for, I forget the percentage. It's like 70% of our communication or something, or maybe even more, I forget. But yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. And I'm also just a person who's really in tune to nonverbal cues. It's just the way my mind works. So yeah, it's actually interesting sometimes to do the recordings without being. Now I'm spoiled, is what I'm saying. I'm like, if I have to interview someone I have a couple interviews lined up and they live out of town, I'm like, oh man, I almost don't want to do them, but I really want to talk to the people. So I'm going to go ahead and follow through with it. But I'm like, oh damn, I wish I could get them in person.
Yeah, it makes such a big difference. So what would you say has been your biggest struggle or challenge with your show, and how did you really work through it?
The biggest challenge with my podcast, I would say, is just the organization of it, and as that pertains to monetizing the show. So what I did is I hired an assistant to really help me on the production end, who's my assistant, Tati, and she essentially became my show producer. In her email signature, it's like the Life Stylist show producer. And so she handles like just getting all the links and files to everyone in Dropbox and putting the show in Libsyn and iTunes and launching it on the website. And she kind of handles the whole thing like that. And I'll tell you what, without help doing that, it never would have happened. That said, there's still a degree of organization that's required on my end, and just staying on top of scheduling and cutting all the bumpers and promos and just knowing what ads I'm going to run and how many ads I owe which vendor, and all of the kind of admin stuff I find to be really laborious, even with a really competent assistant. My assistant happens to live in Hawaii and I'm in California, so the time lag also makes it a little difficult because I can't just text and, at any time. There's time difference and all that kind of stuff. And she just has a different lifestyle. She's out running around the jungle and comes home and does her work when it's time for her to do her work. She's not like on a 9 to 5 where I know when I can reach her and stuff. So it's been a little challenging just kind of keeping organized with all of the admin. And then the other piece is in terms of the monetization. How do you say that? Monetization.
Something along those lines.
Can't even say the damn word. As far as monetizing the podcast, that's challenging because not so much that it's that difficult to find paid advertisers, but it's difficult to keep track of those relationships. And again, to have a grip on Evernote and having files of like every swipe copy that I need to be in charge of for each brand, and how many ads I've run and how long they are, and if I'm hitting the points right, and if I say the links right and get the promo codes right, and all of that sort of stuff. And it was really, as far as, making money on the show, it was really difficult for the first few months because I didn't have enough downloads to get paid ads. And so I had to pay out of pocket, which was quite a burden due to the fact that I own another business. I have other stuff going on. So this was like a side project. So I had to pay for everything out of pocket. And the way that I produce my show, because I'm so picky about the quality of the branding, the graphic design, the sound editing, the theme song, I really want it to sound professional. It costs a lot more money than probably some shows, that are at my level of listenership. So I had to go out of pocket, probably a couple $1,000s a month, 4 months, just to launch not just my podcast, but my website and sort of the whole brand, which was a serious burden. And the way that I did it, just as a strategy that might be useful to you or anyone else that wants to start a show and not end up homeless because of it, is I immediately developed relationships with brands in an affiliate capacity, so that anything that I'm using in my personal life in terms of just, supplementation, biohacking tech, any of this kind of stuff, any stuff that I use, I reached out to all those brands and was like, hey, I'm already using your stuff. I think it's the best. I want to help promote. Give me an affiliate account. And so I'm signed up with probably 30 brands or something like that. And what I did in the beginning in terms of advertising is I would just cut promos that are like paid ads. Hey, this is the Life Stylist Podcast. It's brought to you by Bulletproof. Have you tried Bulletproof coffee? Blah, 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 And I'd run an ad or a number of ads on each episode, even though I wasn't technically getting paid. But those ads were connected to affiliate links, so that if I generated sales from the ads, at least I would get a little chump change from that. And then eventually, as I started to get more listeners, I could go to those brands and say, hey, I've been running your ads. They're converting. How about you start paying me for those ads? Or I just go to new brands and be like, hey, I've been running ads for A, B, and C companies. They're converting really well. Do you guys want to do a package of paid ad spots? And so, it took me about 6 months before people started actually paying me to do ad reads. And so that was a challenging transition. And then it's still somewhat challenging, just as I said, to keep track of all the admin, but also sometimes brands want to cycle in and out of ad spots. So they might buy a package of 8 ads and then those run out in 2 months. And I'm like, oh, shoot. Damn, I'm cutting my promos. Like, actually, today I'm cutting promos for my show for next Tuesday. And I'm like, uh-oh. I owe this company some ads, and that'll be their first one. And I'm like, oh, dude, I only have 1 paid ad for next week's episode. And then I have to reach out to those brands and get them to re-up another package so that I can make sure that each episode has 2 or 3 paid ads. So sort of keeping track of the metrics there is a little bit challenging, and making sure that no shows go by where I'm not at least getting my expenses paid for that episode.
That's really good advice, because that's some stuff that I'm I'm thinking about right now, because my downloads have picked up not quite to the point where I could get any big sponsorship dollars or anything like that. Well, definitely not big sponsorship dollars, but some sponsorship dollars or advertising dollars. So that affiliate point's a really, really interesting one. Thanks for that. And
yeah, dude, I mean, that's the thing. If you're covering stuff that is related to products, like all health and wellness and fitness, I mean, is associated with products. It's like the way I look at this, and I had to work through a little bit. I felt a little weird, like, oh, what am I, a shill for all these brands now or something? But it's like, dude, I don't think people in the audience of podcasts realize the amount of hours that a host like me or you spend. I mean, on each of my episodes, some of my episodes are 2 to 3 hours long. I mean, including prepping for the show. And I'm not complaining. I love it. I'm just saying this is the way it is. But prepping for a show, recording the show, dealing with all the files afterward, cutting all the intros, the outros, doing the show notes, posting, the editing, all of that. I mean, I spend, I don't know, probably on one episode, maybe 6 or 7 hours of my time, I'm estimating.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and then say like, okay, and then, so that's for the podcast, but say there's a supplement. Like I really love this supplement called Qualia. Okay. It's like a nootropic stack for brain cognition, brain health, focus, and all that. So I love Qualia, and I just love to use it as a customer. I order it every month. I take it 5 days a week. It's like my best buddy. And because I love it and I'm excited about it, well, I'm going to post it on Instagram and talk about it on my show, just because I want to turn people on to a great product and I want to support the company. That's just what I like to do. But if I'm going to go above and beyond and like make a video and tag them and do all this stuff, it's like the audience is getting, whether it be podcast or social media audience, for lack of a better term, it's like weird, but followers or whatever you want to call the people that are consuming the content, it's like they get the benefit of me spending hours doing all this research and development and vetting the top brands and the top stuff. The brands win because I'm bringing in possible lifetime value customers to their company. And so what do I get out of it other than just being looked at as a nice guy and someone who's got some expertise in terms of vetting different services or products? Well, I want to get paid to help promote the brands that I believe in. And so the audience wins, the consumer wins, the brand wins, and I win. So I think that if all three parties are benefiting, then it's got integrity, it's on the up and up, and it's a really good arrangement. But that doesn't just happen because you're a fan of whatever. I mean, you got to contact these companies. You got to say, hey, listen, I want some free shit. Send me some of your, I mean, I really like, I call companies up now and I'm like, hey, I saw this thing in your site. I really wanted it. Say it's $500 or $5,000. I'm like, how about you just send me one of those and I'll help you guys sell them if I like it. And some brands say yes and some say no, or some say not yet, or some say pay half price or whatever, But that's kind of what this business model for me is like really doing my research, finding the experts, finding the best products, the best services for all things health and wellness. And I look at myself as a journalist or a reporter in a sense, like, hey, I've tried the top 3 detox protocols in the world. I've done my research. I think I found the best one. I'm going to do my labs, my medical labs. I'm going to do this detox. Then I'm going to show my labs after. And that's benefiting me, but it's also really benefiting someone in the audience. It's like, oh shit, now I don't have to waste my time and money trying 3 different dumb detoxes that might not even work. This dude put himself through hell to try this detox protocol, and I'm seeing the results. And so they win. And then the brands that I'm representing that they might buy that detox from are really benefiting. And, it's like, it's great for everyone. So I like any business model where all parties involved benefit, but it does take a lot of time and energy to set it all up. And I'll just say that in closing on that topic is that the affiliate stuff really doesn't move the needle at all until you have a really big audience. I mean, sometimes I really work hard to promote a brand and I'm like, cool, I got a check for $10.47 this month. It's like, great. Somebody bought a $20 bottle of vitamins and I got, $1.50. It's like, wow. It's not paying my editor his $700 bill that I just paid yesterday. You know what I mean? So But it's one of those things, if you're a Ben Greenfield or some of these guys and like that are really big in the health and fitness and have a huge audience and have been at it for a while, well, if I talk about this rad new supplement and instead of 5 people buying it because they heard my podcast, 500 people buy it, well, then that $10 commission check is now, $3,500, and it's meaningful when there's a number of those coming in per month.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Because I'm thinking of the products that I talk about all the time. I don't get paid to promote them. I just use them, or I've used them for years, and I'm like, you guys got to use this. It's great. You got to check it out.
Well, dude, that's great. And I did that for 19 years before I had any kind of platform. Dude, I put together a list of protocols and links. And I mean, I've turned so many friends and family and colleague onto all of these great brands. And it's been wonderful to do that. But that's because I had a job that was paying my bills. And that's not how I made a living. It's just something I did because I'm passionate about health. And I want to help people, and I love supporting the brands that are doing it right, because in the health industry, so many brands are total BS and are charlatans and are selling just absolute worthless products and just, robbing people blind. But once I decided that this was going to be a business, it was like, well, okay, hang on a minute. I had to really adjust my thinking. Like, wait a minute, I'm getting hosed here. Like, I'm spending hours on producing a video about some biohack or something, giving that content out for free, which is cool. And then the brand's making all this sales. And here now I'm going to go on their website and place an order for $350. It's like, well, wait a minute. They should be sending me that stuff for free, and I'll help promote it if I believe in what they're doing. So
yeah,
I had to build some credibility in an audience first to be able to do that. But now I'm still have to like rethink. I'll find myself like being all embarrassed to ask someone to send me a sample of something. I'm like, wait, what am I doing? I'm going to put this on Instagram and 25,000 people are going to look at it. It's like, that's worth something. So it's a bit of a mind shift, a mindset shift for me too, to realize that as an influencer, for lack of a better term for people like us, we do things and it has influence on people in a positive way, hopefully, that there's value in that, and to not be ashamed and just hit up brands and be like, hey, let's work together. Let's help each other,
Yeah, I think as long as if it's a win-win for everyone, it seems to make a lot of sense. What's the audience size that you think you need to get started on something like that?
Well, here's the thing, man. I think that with the affiliates, at least what I did, and it seems to be paying off, is even when I had no audience, like any product that I have used or that I still use that I really believe in, or even some of them that I know are the best, but I just can't afford them yet. For example, a product I promote all the time is called a Samina bed. And Samina beds, for the whole get down, you're looking at between $10,000 and $30,000. I mean, this is literally the Rolls Royce of beds. I did so much research. I made a 45-minute documentary about these beds, a video. You can find it on my YouTube, Luke Storey, Samina bed. I think the video is called The Healthiest Bed in the World. Now, I did that before I had one, and I'm promoting them. And when and if I sell one of those beds, I'll get a commission, which I'll use toward getting myself one of the beds. But I didn't wait until I had an audience to start working with brands and promoting stuff as an affiliate. I just signed up with every brand that I believed in was the best, and have kept track of those relationships and all of the URL links and, all that kind of stuff, just making sure that the accounts are all stable and hooked up to the right PayPal and all that. So there's a lot of admin to get it set up. But now that I have whatever it is, 25, 30 brands, now anytime I find something new and they have an attractive affiliate model, I'll just add that to the collection. So I would say my advice would be to start those accounts as affiliates right away and then work on the audience. Now, for me, I don't think I could pay my living expenses just with podcast and affiliate revenue right now. And I'm at about, like I said, 10,000 downloads a week, over 1 million now within the first. So I think I hit 1 million around a year and a half into the show, which people say is good. To me, I look at the Rogan and Tim Ferriss thing, 200 million downloads. I'm like, I'm excited about 1 million. That's cool, but I want to get into that range. No, I'm not a New York Times bestselling author yet or anything like Tim Ferriss is. He's been around for a long time, but I'm not at all satisfied with 10,000 downloads a week. My goal for this year is to get up to 100,000 downloads per week. That's what I'm talking about. Then those seeds that I planted with the brands that I work with in the beginning, then those start to become meaningful. There's this tipping point that I can see I'm, I wouldn't say on the verge of, but at some point, hopefully by the end of this year, can kind of hit this point where a lot of revenue starts pouring in, and it's sort of retroactive payment for working for less than minimum wage to produce my podcast for 2 years at that point. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because if I don't do this because it would make me want to give up, but like it really is a labor of love at this point. If I look at how many hours I put into each podcast episode and how much net revenue is actually left in my pocket at the end of every month, it's negligible still.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, honestly, it is something I think I would probably do for free anyway. I might not have the production value that I'm always aiming to achieve on my show. If it was totally for free, I might just like get on a mic with someone who's like, hey, what's up? Not edit anything and just leave it pretty raw. That's the only difference, but I still think I would do what I do essentially for free as a hobby, just because I'm that into it and I enjoy it that much. But if I can put a little more effort and really fine tune it and refine the whole brand and the offerings, then I'm going to do that and make a go of it and turn it into a business,
Yeah, I'm right there with you on a lot of this, because I feel like it's a long-term investment, and it's also there you go, there's another like it's investment.
Dude, you're gonna train your audience to hear every time you say like now they're gonna be listening to you like, oh man, he still does that.
Shit, I messed up. I'll have to edit all of them out.
Yeah.
The investment piece that I was talking about is not just investing in the long-term value of the podcast, but also investing in the knowledge that you gain while doing it, the relationships that you create. I feel like there's much more to it from my perspective, and maybe you would agree that a lot more comes out of it than just, the financial side of it. I feel like I built a ton of amazing relationships with some people that I looked up to for years before I got this thing started. And I was like, oh, that'd be a cool person to sit down with for an hour or so and hear what their stories and experiences have been and learn from them. So it's kind of I feel like it has like a compound effect.
Dude, I still can't believe the human beings that I get to sit down and have conversations with. I mean, I sometimes, this is like bordering on imposter fraud syndrome or whatever, but sometimes I'm still interviewing people and I'm going, does this person realize I'm actually not that famous? You know what I mean? Like, I don't have as many listeners as maybe some of the other shows they would go on, because I ask everyone, and I've only gotten no from a couple people, but yeah, it's the relationships that you're able to build and the access to the brilliant people that you're able to have as a podcast host, in my experience, have been invaluable. So yeah, I mean, I'm talking about the money and all of that stuff, but obviously it puts you on. What it's done for me is it's kind of put me on the map. I'm a guy who had a lot of knowledge and experience and really a lot to offer, just because I've been so obsessed with all of this stuff for so many years. But I really didn't have any credibility when I switched over I had, credibility in the fashion industry and in Hollywood and stuff like that. But when I made the switch, I needed something I could sink my teeth into and be like, hey, I'm the guy who does this. So being the host of a successful podcast kind of gave me instant credibility, or at least as the show gained in some popularity. And so now I find, just the people that I'm able to email with or call and have advice with, or, I'm talking to the founders and CEOs of like huge health and wellness related companies, and we might go to lunch, and it's just the access that you're able to get to people when you have a platform is just insane. And also just the stuff I learn. I mean, especially in the areas of, not so much for me in health, I don't know that I've had any huge groundbreaking discoveries from interviewing my guests because I'm already familiar with their work, and I already get a lot of that. But when it comes to the more personal development piece, the spiritual teachers, and for me specifically, the teachers around relationships, romance, sex, intimacy, the shows that I've done on that. I mean, I've had my mind freaking blown, and I'm literally sitting there in the interview going, oh my God, I'm getting a free therapy session right now. This is amazing. I'm learning life skills that are really going to impact my future and my ability to have healthy relationships and a family someday and all of that kind of stuff. So those are the times where I feel like I'm really cheating the system, where that's not someone that I could just email their website and say, hey, I need some personal advice on my relationships. Can you help me? They would say, give me your credit card or get in line, or just not reply. But when you have a show and it's going to serve, to build their brand and their credibility and get their message out, then they become willing to do that. But you still get the benefit as the host of really learning everything that you're speaking to them about, which has been a huge benefit for me.
Yeah. It's crazy to me that's something I've felt the same way too. I'd love to get a relationship expert on at some point in time, because I think that it would be really interesting conversation. I'd probably learn a lot about my own, how my own behavior and relationship measures up to, what a healthy relationship from their perspective would look like. But it's like I had Jarek Robbins on. I think I just released that episode this week, maybe on Monday, something like that. And he's like a high performance coach and does a lot of work with coaching CEOs and military leaders and all these people on how to perform at a high level. And I'm sure he charges a substantial amount of money to do that. And we had a good hour and a half long conversation. And I just kept asking him all the questions I could think of about how someone, if they were to start today to perform at a high level, what would that look like? Where would they start? What's step one? And I kind of had this weird moment during the middle of the interview where I'm like, man, if I had called him and just asked him if he would just talk to me about this, they probably would have sent over an invoice for an absurd amount of money. But because because we're having this conversation.
Dude. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy, man. I had that experience early on in my show. I invited the author John Gray to be on as a guest, I think he has sold more books on relationships than any other human in the history of the universe.
Wow.
Being the author of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, brilliant guy. Really, really down to earth, but deeply spiritual, just really, really bright guy with tons of life experience and is one of the foremost experts on relationships. And, I just thought, I think I saw him speak at an event and I was like, what the hell? I'll just shoot an email to the website and they'll probably never answer me, but what have I got to lose? I email their website, say, hey, this is my show. This is what I'm doing. These are the guests that have been on so far. I'm new, but I'm growing fast. And they answered right away. And they said, yeah, John said he'd love to do it. He can't wait. And I was like, really? What the hell? I almost felt like I was getting over on them or something. And then, again, I just got so much value and inspiration out of that conversation. It was amazing. I had that same thing. I was like, I know he does some sort of counseling and stuff. It's probably really expensive. There's probably a really long waiting list. But because I have a platform and I'm going to help him sell books and promote his message, then I kind of get a free session. And I think that's also something that makes the passion in the interviews come through when you're as the host, when you're really asking the questions that you want to know. I think there's a real a power in that energetically, because you're not just asking rote questions that every other interviewer would ask, or that are questions that you think you guess that your audience would like to know, but it's coming from the heart. You have this childlike curiosity about the topics that your guest has expertise in. And so when I interview someone, I'm just like, I'm here, a 47-year-old guy, but I'm like a rabid kid, that's asking, all these questions about the universe that have been on my mind literally my whole life. And so I think the audience feels that excitement and they feel that curiosity and they buy into the passion. I think that's definitely some of the feedback that I've gotten from listeners to my show is like, man, you're just so into it. It makes me into it. I'm like, yeah, that's because I pick guests that I'm obsessed with and fascinated by, that I'm a huge fan of. So most of my guests that I interview, I'm having this kind of super fan moment with them, and that builds this excitement with the listener as well.
That reminds me of of a guest that I had on. I'd been watching his YouTube videos. It was Noah Kagan from AppSumo, and I watched a YouTube video him and Tim Ferriss did, and I mentor a few students at a university here locally, and I kept telling them all to watch this video, and I on like a going out on a limb, I shot him Instagram. I think I shot you a message on Instagram too, but I messaged him and I was like, hey man, love this video you made. What would it take for you to be on the show? Like, what would I need to do to book you? And he's like, just email me. Here it is. I'm like, oh, all right, cool. And
yeah,
and it was just like,
funny.
Oh, nice. Oh, I guess
it's funny. Well, dude, you know what? Because not like I'm Mr. Popularity at this point, but I do get a lot of requests to go on shows now, and I've never said no to a podcast just because I think people were so gracious when I had no credibility. I didn't have a leg to stand on as a podcaster or, a content producer, influencer in this realm whatsoever. I came from a totally different industry. So when I started hitting people like John Gray up and they're like, yeah, you seem like a great guy, we'd love to do it. I feel ingratiated to kind of do the same. So I get hit up by people all the time, and they're like, they get ready to give me this big pitch. Okay, this is what my show's about, this and that. I'm just like, yeah, I'll do it. It's like, I don't even care. I don't even need to see your bio. As long as you actually have a show that's going to be out somewhere and I can help you do that, I'm in, at least while my schedule permits. And of course, maybe it'll drive some traffic to my show or something like that. But I just remember what it's like to be new and being like, oh man, I hope someone will be my guest, and then getting some of the bigger ones really helped me not only grow the show, but I got a lot more confident really fast when people were receptive, so.
Yeah, it makes you feel pretty good when someone that you look up to is like, oh, your show? Absolutely. I'd be honored to be a guest. And you're like,
dude,
oh shit.
Yeah. it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. I still get excited when I hit someone up, even not necessarily people that are famous, but just someone who like I really want on my show just because I'm passionate about their work. And, like I just reached out. One of my listeners, that's a great thing too. As you go along, your listeners will help you get the guests you want if you talk about those guests. So sometimes on my show, I'll say something like, yeah, I don't know a lot about the whole vaccine issue. I really want to interview someone that's got some expertise there. And then a listener will email me and be like, hey, I know the most badass vaccine person. Here they are. I'm going to CC you. And they introduce me. Next thing you know, I've got them, which just happened to me. There's a guy that I saw speak a couple years ago at a conference named Del Bigtree, and he's one of the really big anti-vaccine guys, and seems to have a lot of really good, powerful information, and is definitely one of the foremost voices in that battle. And I don't know if I just emailed his website, maybe they'd never get it, maybe they never get back to me, but I got an intro from one of my listeners, and they're like, yeah, we'd love to do the show. And it's one of those things I'm like, really? You're going to do my show? You know what I mean? It's like, they might not be like famous in the worldly sense, but they're famous within the alternative health community. And they're famous to me because they're like the one person that I really resonated with and that I trust, and I want to get their perspective. But I still get super pumped. And when I get a response email that someone like, yeah, we'll do it. I'm like, oh my God, yes. I get super excited.
Yeah, it's a great feeling too, because it's a small win, and you're just like, all right, well, check that one. That's my win for the day.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I gotta ask, if I'm sure that people approach you all the time that know you're a podcaster that want to start their own, and they probably ask you, Luke, hey, I want to start my own show. What advice do you have for me to get started today?
It's funny. I get that that question quite a bit. It's usually, what equipment do I need? And I actually have it in a document, and I just send it to people. I'm like, here's all the stuff I use. Like, I'm not trying to have the best, like better proprietary sound setup than everyone else. I want all podcasts to sound better, so I'm happy to share that. I really don't enjoy shows with really bad sound, and I just like to help people out. But in terms of more, in a broad way, I would say whether you're doing a podcast or any other channel of content, don't even bother unless you're sure that you can be consistent with that content. There's a saying in content creation that consistency is king, and it's really, really true. And that's been proven doing my show now for it'll be 2 years in June of 2018 as we record this in January. And there's one thing that I committed to when I started, and that was, I'm putting out a show every goddamn Tuesday. I don't care if there's a nuclear war, my show's coming out. Like, I will learn how to press submit on iTunes or whatever I got to do. I don't care if, in other words, like, if all my people that help me disappear, I'll figure it out. I'm never missing an episode, and I haven't. And people look forward to those episodes. And so I think consistency is the number one thing. In terms of strategy, something that I found to be useful is I recorded, and I got this from Dave Asprey, who I was doing executive coaching with at the time. He's the CEO of Bulletproof. And this is going back a couple years, and he had a really successful podcast, of course, Bulletproof Radio. And so in a session with him, I said, Dave, I really want to make a splash when I start my show. So you got any ideas? And he said, yeah, you should record a bunch of shows, have them in the can, and then release them every single day for like a nice launch. There's a number of reasons strategically why that's meaningful, but that's what I did. I recorded 15 shows. And then I put out 10 shows in a row for 10 days so that I could make a nice imprint in iTunes, and so that I would already have 10 episodes out as I started to reach out to guest 16, guest 17, 18, et cetera, right? So I could say, like, hey, here's the first 10 guests I had, and those 10 guests happened in 10 days rather than 10 weeks. In other words, I didn't want to wait, 2 months, 2.5 months to then approach people and say, hey, I have 10 episodes out. I didn't have to tell them they all came out 10 days in a row. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I could say, like, I had these 5 huge people on my show already. Do you want to be a guest? And it made it easier for me to get guests. And then also, as I said, you make more. I never got in the new and noteworthy or the what's hot in iTunes. I don't know. I'm always in the top 200. I'm usually like around between 100 and 150 in the health category in iTunes right now, which is good, but I want to be in the top 10.
Yeah. I know the feeling. You're like, I'm going to be there. I don't think hacking the system worked in the way I thought it would in terms of getting in the new and noteworthy on iTunes. They didn't seem to pay much attention to me, but it definitely helped me to get bigger and better guests and just establish my credibility. And then I drop down to every Tuesday, and I just make sure that comes out every time. And then also really being strategic about the guests, and also in the way in which I pitch guests. So if I email someone's website, I'm very thoughtful about how I approach them and the terminology that I use, and also the other guests that I highlight. So if I'm trying to get a guest that's a yoga teacher or meditation teacher, I'm not going to send them like, these are the 5 people that have been on it that are like biohacking nerd health people, because they'll never have heard of them. So I really leverage the sort of anchor guest names that I have, so that when I pitch new guests, I can show my credibility very specifically to the relevance of their brand and their message. Does that make sense? Yeah, that totally makes sense, because it's as you're talking through this, I'm thinking about how I've approached people, and sometimes I'm like, I don't know if this person is going to have a clue who any of these people are, but I'm like, well, I'll just plug them here anyways, and I'll throw a link to like their Facebook, and maybe they'll click it and see that they have like 100,000 likes and be like, oh, they must
right.
they must have some status or something. So it gives the appearance that I have some credibility, even though I don't have 100K likes or anything like that. It's like people are willing to take their time to sit down with me that do have that level of authority or credibility or following. So it makes someone more likely to take that next step too.
Yeah. And then also another thing is just in terms of selecting guests. I mean, I have sometimes guests on that are relatively unknown. They have little to no social media following. They're never going to share it. No one knows who the hell they are. But what they have to say is so valuable that I put them on the show just because the audience is going to love it and they're going to really get a lot out of it. So I'm not always motivated by like their popularity or their social media following, but there are also other guests that I wouldn't say I ever have anyone on the show that I'm not interested in or I don't think has a valid point of view, but I'm definitely motivated to have guests on my show that have a huge reach and that I know are going to share the episode and get me followers. And so, that's something I really look at when somebody pitches me to be on my show. I don't have any shortage ever of guests. I have a list of about 300 people that I want on my show. So I'm not like, hey, wow, I'm really stuck. I can't find guests. Like I know who I want. So that's never a shortage. So there's too many of those. But when I get an inquiry that comes in, I really take the time to look at their following and their demographic and see if it's a good fit. And I'll kind of move someone up the priority list of guests according to the reach that they have. And it's just good business to do that as long as they fit within the context of the show. And I really believe in what they're doing and they're engaging and interesting and brilliant people, then I'm really happy to have them on and then have them share their guest spot with their audience. And I've gotten a lot of listeners from just people being on the show as a guest, then sharing it, and those people gravitating over to mine. And then the last piece that I'll give you that I think could be of some real value to someone who's new is start positioning yourself not only as a podcast host, but also a guest. And, you asked me to be on your show. I don't know you from Adam. You seem like a cool guy. You're doing some cool stuff. I like the direction of your show. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm doing that because it was done for me, like I said, and I feel that it feels good to reciprocate the universe in that way. But also, I'm hoping that as a guest on your show, maybe a few people will hear this interview and be like, oh, that guy was interesting. I'm going to go check out the Life Stylist podcast. So now where I am in my show is I'm probably about 3 months ahead in interviews, which is way too many. So I've put a hiatus on recording my own show temporarily because I have to get through a bunch of pre-recorded ones before they get stale. And I'm aggressively pitching myself to the biggest podcast in the world that I can find as a guest. So that I can get my own personality, my own brand, and the things that I'm knowledgeable about out there, and then attract people back to what I'm doing.
Yeah, the having the backlog of podcasts is like a double-edged sword, because on one front you're like, well, all right, I can take my foot off the gas for a little bit, and I'm not going to scramble to like get anything done, and you can kind of approach it a little more strategically. But then you also are like, well, damn, I just did that one and I really liked it, but it's going to have to wait like 2 months before it comes out.
Yeah, it sucks. And sometimes the guests too will email me and be like, hey, were you ever putting that thing out? It was 3 months ago. I'm like, yeah. And I have to move people up in the queue. But, I'll give you one more strategic thing too. It helps me to kind of solidify my process when I verbalize it too, which is cool because sometimes I just intuitively strategize and I just keep pushing forward without just taking the time to map it out. But another thing that I do is I definitely stagger the topics of my guests. So I won't do 4 Tuesdays of spiritual woo-woo fairies and moon dust shows. I'll do like a spiritual person, and then the next week I'll have a hardcore scientific biohacker doctor on. And I also try to alternate between male and female so I don't have too many of one or the other in a row, just to add the diversity there. But that's also been useful too. But that gets tricky, really planning out the release schedule. What I do is I just make an iCal. I make a specific calendar for podcast releases that's shared between my team. But sometimes someone will be like, hey, I have this, we did this interview and I'm putting a book out. Can you launch my show on this particular date. And I'm like, oh man, it kind of messes up my sequence because I just had 4 women in a row, or I had 4 doctors on, or 4 hippies, or whatever, So it gets a little tricky when you do have that backlog, because you want to fulfill your promise to have that person on your show and actually release it in somewhat of a timely fashion. And if possible, for it to coincide with their schedule of content or releases, or, books and things like that, so that you can help them to, market whatever it is they're trying to market. So the scheduling is a little bit tricky too, just parsing out those episodes in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Scheduling is tricky because it's especially when you have like a lot of similar topics in the backlog, and then you're like, well,
yeah,
I just did this new one on this other subject. I have to throw it in, try to get it done quicker or something. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to wait. Like I did a show in the very beginning about bone broth, because I found the most badass bone broth company. It's called Arizona Grass Raised Beef. These guys are insane. Like their process is the most badass process I've ever discovered. Their bone broth is the best bone broth I've ever found. It's also quite expensive, and it's shipped frozen, and it's not for the faint at heart when it comes to finances. So then I got approached by Kettle and Fire, which is another more mainstream commercial brand of bone broth that's much more accessible, and you can get it at Whole Foods, and it is a lot less expensive and stuff. But they approached me to be on the show, but I had to wait and push that out because I don't want to be like, hey, it's the Bone Broth podcast. It's like, that's just one dietary choice. It's not something I want to do a show on all the time. So sometimes, even though you have a really great episode, you do have to space them out so that they're not too repetitious, especially if they're focused and nuanced like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about my release schedule right now and how I should probably mix it up a little bit, where I probably have a few too many business folks in a row, and I should mix in some travel. I think I have a painter and an author and some other ones recorded that I can spin in there. But that's a good point, because I might lose that audience that's not just there for business stuff.
Yeah, another thing is that I pay attention closely to the feedback I get, the iTunes reviews, the emails, the comments on social media. I think even on my web form, I know on the web form on my website, lukestorey.com, when you submit a contact form, it asks the question. It says first, one of the questions is, hey, tell me your story if you have one. And people really give me a lot about their lives, which is cool because it informs the kind of content that I want to put out. And it also helps me identify my customer avatar, like what the people that are listening to my show and eating up my content are going through in their life. So they'll be like, oh, I struggled with, losing weight or addictions, or I just went through a divorce. I mean, they tell me some really harrowing tales of their struggles, and it helps inform the topics that I want to cover. And then I also ask them, what more do you want to hear from me? Like, do you have any suggestions, basically? And I'll get a lot of feedback that's like, more spirituality and meditation. And then the next email will be like, more biohacking, more science, more tech. So I really pay attention to that. And it's probably about half and half, like the spiritual folks and then the biohacking. The metaphysical and the physical are split about 50-50, and the audience is about 65% female for me, and the rest male. And so I think about that when I'm timing the episodes, definitely based on feedback. But at the end of the day also, dude, it's like, I mean, you got to just get the job done. You can't please everyone all the time. So sometimes I have to adjust the release schedule for other purposes than just what's going to get me, listener retention. I have to keep the guest happy and all that kind of stuff too,
Yeah, I definitely, you got to keep the guests happy, but then you also have to you kind of just have to go with what you have sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So Luke, this kind of wraps up the first part of our show. This last part is kind of, our canned questions where we try to figure out the, quote unquote formula for what's really helped you to build the career and life that you enjoy today. So the first question that I have for you is, what does your daily routine look like, or what do you do on a daily basis that you feel like gives you a leg up on the day or makes you feel like you're the most productive version of yourself?
That's a 2-hour answer. I'm such a ritualistic person, and I have so many spiritual practices and just health regimens and stuff. It's hilarious. Anytime somebody comes and stays at my house, they're just like, dude, what are you doing now? Every 10 minutes I'm taking some supplement, using some biohack tech. So it's quite involved, but essentially what I make sure that I do on a daily basis on the physical front is that I make sure that I've been grounded, like literally touching the ground. I make sure I get sunshine. I make sure that the water that I drink and bathe in is super clean. I eat organic food whenever possible. I avoid inflammatory foods. I take an infrared sauna just about every day. I use my Juve red light therapy every day. I use a device called a biomat every day. I use a device called an amp coil, which is a PEMF and biofeedback device. So I use a lot of technology that amplify positive elements of nature. And then I also use nature and just getting outside as much as possible and getting light on my skin and in my eyes and things like that. So I live in the city. I live in a really toxic urban environment. There's noise pollution, air pollution, every kind of goddamn pollution imaginable. So I do my best to not add to that. And I do everything I can to mitigate that. And the way that I do my daily routine is I habituate everything and stack everything so that I'm doing a number of different things that are good for me at once. That's on the physical plane. So in other words, if I'm going to sit and meditate, which I do every day, twice a day for 20 minutes, if I'm going to meditate, well, I might as well sit under some weird heat lamp or some biohacking device, or I'm going to run like 3 or 4 things at a time. If I'm going to sit there for 20 or 30 minutes, why just do one thing if I can, add those on? And so that just becomes habitual so that I just have a very automated way that I start every day. So on the physical plane, it's kind of all the supplementation and the biohacking stuff and getting in nature. And then in terms of mental, emotional, and spiritual, I do my best, as I said earlier, to listen to something really motivational and spiritual right first thing in the morning, so I just get my head right. I'm really actively in prayer all the time, not in a religious sense, but just in a spiritual sense. So I'm constantly reaching out for that unseen, unexplainable, ineffable, intelligent, loving force that I believe is present. Well, I don't believe, I experience all the time is present. I really stay connected to that. And then I stay very watchful of my thinking to avoid the inner critic and whiner and bitcher and complainer. So if I find my mind finding fault with anything in my present reality and bitching about it, I try to really avoid energizing those thoughts and let alone verbalizing or acting out on those thoughts. So just keeping a very mindful, reptilian lizard-like stare out at the world where I'm just calm, cool, collected, focused, in touch with that creative intelligence of the universe. This is the goal, at least. Do I achieve this? No, I'm a neurotic basket case a lot of the times, like any of us. But that's really that's my intention, is to keep spiritually aligned, to really watch my thinking, and then to do everything I can to just increase my physical vitality and health throughout the day.
That is a hell of a daily routine.
Yeah, well, you got to hit it from all angles, dude. Mind, body, spirit. I mean, I could sit around biohack myself into the freaking grave, and if I'm still having resentments and I'm unable to forgive people and to have compassion and empathy, then it doesn't matter if I have a 6-pack and huge, like muscles or whatever, full head of hair, whatever physical attributes you're trying to get, or, healthy digestion or a pain-free body or any of the goals that any of us have. It's like you can't just do one. In my experience, you really have to hit it from all angles. And it does take some time throughout the day to do all these practices. But what I always, repeat and reiterate is just that as you start to add them in, they just become habituated, just like brushing your teeth. So, no one sits around like, oh my God, what a hassle. I have to spend 10 minutes brushing my teeth. It's just what you do. So I maybe have 50 rituals per day, like brushing your teeth, that just become as automatic, and I don't even notice the fact that they take time.
That's really interesting that you say that, because it's stacking habits, stacking routines, even getting started on habits and routines is such an interesting thing. Even like for me personally, just taking that what habits you want or how you want to spend your day, and then kind of building it from the ground up, like one habit at a time.
Yeah.
Such an interesting experience.
It is. And it also, you know what, it edges out some of the, I don't want to say bad habits, because I don't really think in good or bad terms like that. Habits that are less productive. For me, for example, I don't want to give rise to the belief that I'm addicted to my phone, but my behavior with social media and my phone has a tendency to be really compulsive. Those dopamine hits of like refreshing Instagram and stuff. It's a habit that I really don't like and I'm really working on. So I find if I can displace some of those habits that are not productive, or even in some cases counterproductive, with positive habits, then there's sort of no time left to waste on crap like that, because I'm doing so many positive things for my own health and sanity and well-being. It's just like in the morning, maybe item number 5 on my list is jumping in a totally cold shower, which in LA in the summer isn't that cold, but right now it's pretty damn cold. The water's probably low 50s or something. It's pretty jarring, and I very rarely use the warm or hot water in my shower. I mean, I could turn the water heater off in my place. I'd never even notice, basically. And that's just something that's automatic. And that sets me up to have less anxiety that day, because I've built a resilience. If I can handle a cold ass shower for 10 minutes in the morning, then I get out of that shower and check an email and it doesn't say what I want it to say. It becomes much less of a big deal, because I've built this mental and physical toughness and sense of endurance, you know? So it's not just adding the positive habits, but it's also eliminating and dropping away the ones that serve you negatively in any capacity.
The cold shower thing is really interesting too, because it's when I do some of them. I'm not the best about doing it every day, because it's like sometimes it's like -10 here, and I don't really, I don't really want to get in a cold shower.
It's easy for me to, you know, when we were in LA, it's like, oh yeah, I get DMs from people on Instagram all the time, like, oh, okay, tough guy, why don't you move out here to Minnesota or whatever and jump in the lake? And I actually would and do. That's the funny thing. I do cold showers even when I go to, you know, Colorado in the winter or whatever, but it's definitely much harder where you are, for sure.
Yeah, it's no excuse though. It just makes it more of a challenge, and maybe boosts up the resiliency a little bit throughout the day.
Yeah.
So
I mean, everyone has their gimmicks. You know, for some people, the cold shower might not provide as much benefit to them on a conscious level as it does me. To me, I'm literally addicted to them. I'm super bummed in LA in the summer months, which are, of course, like 9 months of the year is summer here, and you can't get that water down below, 70. It's like really annoying. So I go do cryotherapy and jump in an ice bath. That's how habituated I am to cold showers, but I've been doing that for 20 years. And the benefits that I receive outweigh those few short moments of discomfort, and that just becomes part of the routine. And just like when I started to meditate 20 years ago, meditating was a pain in my ass. I hated it. I was like, this is so boring. I suck at this. Who can do this? I keep thinking. I can't stop my mind. I would be so frustrated. And then eventually I learned a technique, and now it's, dude, there's no amount of money you could pay me right now, and I swear to God, this is the truth, to stop meditating. You could come in here with a dump truck and be like, Luke, here's $10 billion cash, and you can never meditate ever again. And I would turn that truck right around, and I'd keep my practice, because I've built value into it. So it doesn't become a sacrifice or something that requires discipline to do. It's just, it would take discipline to not meditate or not take a cold shower at this point, because it's become it's so ingrained in my daily operation.
Yeah, meditation meditation is something where when you first get started, it's a challenge, but I think it's just like anything else. Once you repetition and applying yourself over time, it becomes less of a challenge and more of a healing experience, or even a restorative practice, where you it almost brings you back towards center or your middle or whatever you want to call it. And it kind of helps to keep you balanced. I can speak for myself and probably a lot of other people out there where you just kind of want to push really hard because you have goals and you have stuff you want to accomplish. And sometimes it's just good to take a step back and remember to breathe a little bit because it can take its toll on you if you don't slow down every once in a while.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, it would be a different world if more people were able to adopt something that simple. The cool thing about meditation too is, it might cost you a few bucks to get trained like I did. I spent some money learning the current practice that I do, but then it's like yours for the rest of your life. You have it and you can take it anywhere you want, man. I meditate on park benches, airplanes, sitting in traffic in an Uber. I've meditated in some of the weirdest places you can imagine. And it's just, it's one of those things, man. Once you get the bug for it, there's nothing that'll pry it out of your hands.
Yeah. So the next question I have for you is, what book do you feel like has had the biggest impact on your life?
Oh man, God, it's hard to pick one, and I'm asked this often, and I always pick the same one, and I feel like, God, it's such a I'm like a broken record. If somebody's heard me on a number of different shows, I'm going to say the same thing essentially. I would say, man, I always think of kind of the most recent one. You asked in my whole life the most impactful, not just like what one am I on to right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Then I'm going to say, oh man, probably David R. Hawkins. The book is called Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. David Hawkins.
Yeah, I've never heard of that one before.
Yeah, he's most famous for a book called Power versus Force, which is it's meaningful, but to me a bit dry. Letting Go is just a much easier read. It's written in very common language, and it's just easy to understand. And the gist of that book is that fighting your way through life and fighting reality does not lead to a fulfilling life. And so it's really learning how to, rather than suppressing and repressing negative thoughts and emotions and feelings, but to really work your way through them. And this is the basis of just about every spiritual teaching I've ever come across. But Hawkins is an American dude, or was. He's dead a few years, but he's an American dude that like speaks our language and has a way of, in that book at least, conveying a really profound, deeply spiritual practice, which is the practice of surrender, that principle, and lays out exactly how to do it. So it's not like, oh yeah, if you go meditate for 20 years in a cave, you'll be able to let go of negative emotions. I mean, he gives you the mechanics of how to do it in that book. And I think it's deep enough for an advanced spiritual aspirant to still dig their teeth into, but it's also so accessible to your average person who maybe hasn't spent a lot of time in spiritual pursuit.
Sounds interesting. I'll have to, I think I say this every podcast episode, but I'm like, I'm going to have to add that to my Amazon list and check it out. But you make it sound pretty good.
Yeah, dude, it's like for one example, let's say you go through a breakup and girl leaves your ass and you want to freaking slit your wrist and you want to throw up and you can't sleep and, you're just a wreck. You're heartbroken. You got the blues, It's like the way that our culture, at least in many cases, advises that we deal with that is go find a new girl, go have sex, go watch porn, watch TV, eat some ice cream, smoke cigarettes, shoot heroin, smoke crack, eat some candy, ad infinitum, whatever your coping mechanism is to mask the trauma of that loss. And this concept is not his concept, but a spiritual principle is like, no, really sit with that loss, that trauma, that heartbreak, really, really sit with it and experience it wholly and allow yourself to go directly through it as a means by which to get on the other side of it the fastest. So it's like the fastest way through your trouble, or the fastest way around your trouble is through it. And that's the basis of that book, which is totally counterintuitive because the way that humans are wired is feel pain, avoid the pain, feel pain, avoid the pain, run, run, run. And so, which doesn't work because it just prolongs the pain, or it manifests in neuroses that come out in any number of different seemingly unrelated behavioral manifestations, So now you're flipping off the guy in traffic who didn't deserve it, and you're being an asshole out in the world because you didn't process the loss that you experienced last week. You stuffed it and stuffed it and stuffed it until it just erupts, So it's a healthy way to live an integrated life, is to really allow the human experience and the encyclopedia of emotions that are present in all of our day-to-day lives, to just allow that to kind of happen without being totally consumed by it at the same time. So it's really powerful stuff.
Sounds like it. I can relate to going through stuff like that, and that was actually how I got into meditation in the first place. Was I was just like crazy stressed out. Like I have to do something differently. I'm like, oh, this meditation app looks interesting. And then
dude, totally. Dude, I've met, out of all the people I've interviewed and met being on the path, which the spiritual stuff is really, that's my number one. I mean, that's what my life is about. Sometimes all the health and biohacking and all that is kind of just a Trojan horse to hook people's curiosity and get down to the deeper stuff. But out of all the people I've interviewed or coaching clients I've worked with, very few of them have gotten into things like meditation and reading spiritual books and personal development unless they've really suffered and hit some sort of a bottom. There's generally some catalytic event, like a divorce, a death, a loss of a career, loss of one's health, that pushes someone into, the kind of discipline that's required to really grow and evolve spiritually.
Absolutely. I recommend everyone at least try it, just to try to, I mean, even if you just take 10 minutes a day to breathe, it's such a good practice. It's
dude, for sure.
Yeah. And it's strange. Once you start doing it, you'll get into I promise you, if you just take like a month and you take 10 minutes a day and you just do, just be aware of your breath for 10 minutes a day, I promise you at the end of the month, you're going to get into a situation that's typically stressful, and you're going to notice how calm you are. And you're going to be like, what? Yeah, dude, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's so fun. Sometimes I'll be driving around with a friend, and we'll come back to my car, and there'll be a fat parking ticket on it, $65, $120, whatever. And I'll just walk up, I grab the parking ticket, and I just set it inside the car. Don't say anything. I'm still happy, still talking, in a good mood. I don't even acknowledge it. And whoever I'm with will be like, dude, what? You just got a ticket, or you're supposed to be pissed. I'm like, whoa, why? Like, why suffer twice? Why take two arrows? It's one arrow to have to pay the $68. Why am I going to take another arrow and shove it through my chest and get pissed about the $68 that I can't do anything about? And having the ability to have that sort of emotional resilience doesn't just happen, for me at least, it doesn't just happen because I decide, oh, you know what, I'm just going to stop being stressed out. No, I have to train my nervous system to be able to be a shock absorber and to not freak out and give some exaggerated meaning to a piece of paper on my windshield. Yeah, it's I'm not sure if you've read this book or not. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
I love that. God damn it. Why didn't I think of that title?
It's a great.
Oh my God. I just got so jealous. My tinge of, or no, not jealous, envy. Yeah. Waves of green envy just erupted out of my brain. I'm like, oh my God, that's my book.
Well, you can argue with Mark Manson over that. A concept that he discusses in the book is you only have so many fucks to give. So you have to be careful where you invest them.
Oh my God, dude, that is great.
And if you don't have something really important for you to invest them in, then you end up investing them in little things like, oh man, this waitress got me the wrong drink, or the barista put too much milk in my latte. I'm really upset. Because his belief is that if you don't have anything that you value or you've invested in, not financially, but personally or spiritually or through action, that seeps out into other small things because you have like a required minimum amount that you have to give.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, I highly recommend it. I wish I had an affiliate link for that book, because as many times as I've recommended it, maybe I'll reach out to Mark and
get an Amazon account, affiliate account. You know, it's funny, just jumping back real quick, and I know we're out of time, but with the Amazon affiliates, you know, there's all sorts of things that people want recommendations for, just things that I talk about, like how to get non-blue light bulbs in your house. And someone's like, what are the best ones? Send me a link. I've been using Amazon affiliate links for like 2 years. Anytime I recommend something on Amazon, I might as well get my little 25-cent commission. And this whole time I thought that Amazon was screwing me and that I wasn't getting any commissions. And I'm like, how, after 2 years of sending out literally hundreds of links all over the place, did I never get any commission? And what had happened was I had the wrong bank account linked to Amazon. So there was just these little chump change here and there getting deposited into my personal account rather than my business account. So I just never noticed them. So I was like, I was so stoked to find out that Amazon had not been ripping me off. So don't discount those little links for a $10 book. It might be 25 cents, but a couple of years can go by and you've made 25 cents times a few thousand, and then you actually get a deposit in your bank account going like, oh, wow. Cool. There's $800 this year for just helping people out, you know?
Right. Seems like a nice way to make an extra $800.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. That stuff does start to add up after a while, I think, as the audience grows. You know, it's fun to be able to. I just got a check for $47 today. I mean, it doesn't move the needle, but I helped the company and helped the customer, and, you know, I'll take $47.
Absolutely. So, Luke, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be a guest on the show. I enjoyed our conversation. I feel like I learned a lot. I was trying to take some notes while we were doing this, but I'm sure I'll go back and listen to it again, just because I'm like, man, where was this information when I started my podcast before? Because that would have been really helpful. But last question I have for you, a 2-part question. What's next for you, and what message would you like to leave the audience with today?
Sure. What's next for me is, I don't know, depending on when this is released, but my next immediate project, you know, in addition to just continuing to improve my own podcast, The Life Stylist, is I'll be launching an online class all about how to hack jet lag and travel, which is something I've been working on for years. And I finally encoded everything I've learned from all my guests and everything I've tried, because I travel a lot and I can't stand the effects of travel on my body and mind and all that. So I'm excited about that project. It'll be my first like online course. And then other than that, I just keep going with my show, and I have a coaching practice where I work with people to help them learn all this stuff and apply it to their lives. And as far as a piece of advice, I have number one piece of advice, which is I really believe that for any person, regardless of your faith or lack thereof, or religious upbringing or lack thereof of that finding some sort of spiritual orientation to life is the number one most important endeavor. And in my estimation, the reason that I'm here and that most of us are here is to evolve in terms of our higher spiritual self. So the number one job for me, whether it be through meditation or studying spiritual literature, or even, you know, becoming affiliated with some sort of religion or a self-help group, 12-step group, whatever it is that I really believe in the community of spirituality and also in the individual experience of spirituality, and that it's possible to have a direct relationship with what one might call God or spirit without having to actually buy into any dogmatic system, that each of us has the ability and the sovereignty to really seek a spiritual orientation to life, and that the pursuit of that is going to trump everything when it comes to fulfillment and happiness. Because within any sort of spiritual belief system or spiritual practices or principles inherently is going to end up with service, and service is the ultimate key to life. But I think in order to be of service, we really have to have some sort of dominion over our own psychology, emotions, mind, and our own concept or practice of spirituality. So that would be my number one piece of advice. Find God, however that might show up in your life and whatever you want to call it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Formula. If you'd like to check out Luke's podcast, go ahead and head over to lukestorey.com/lifestyle podcast. If you'd like to check out any of the other links or any of the stuff that we talked about in the show as well, go ahead and check out the show notes where I've linked back to the podcasts that Luke said are some of his favorites, Luke's Instagram. Anything else that we covered will be down in the show notes, so just go ahead and check those out. Now, if you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to hear more, or maybe read some blog posts or some other ramblings or whatever it might be, go ahead and head over to helixacademy.to and sign up for our newsletter. That's a wrap for this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to you stopping by next week. This episode of The Formula was produced by Helix Academy, and the music was provided by the artist known as Moods. Make sure and check him out on Facebook or Spotify. That's MOODS.